Yeah, let me, okay, is that PowerPoint coming up?
Looks
Yeah.
good.
Okay. I'll try not to go too long here, but just looking at some information about SOTA. First, a shout out to everybody that came out for the Colorado 14er event. That is our biggest SOTA weekend, always the first weekend in August. And we've settled in on this 4-day format, which seems to be working because some guys are like, I'm only going on Saturday or Sunday, and others are like, I'm never going on Saturday or Sunday for all kinds of reasons. And so we said, okay, it's a weekend, but we'll add Friday and Monday. And here's kind of the activity we had. Friday was actually the biggest day in terms of activations. Lots of QSOs. Put this on your calendar. Please come out and join us next year, which will be August 2 through 5. And then let's take a look at some of the information from the SOTA database. And, we always kid about, it's not about the points. We're just out there to have fun, but it's also fun to look at the points. So here's all the activators. So actually this slice is our mountain goats. We've got 21 mountain goats. About a month ago, I did an informal comparison with the other associations, and I'll say this is a pretty good story out of Colorado. California has more mountain goats than we do. Of course, their population is probably 10x the state of Colorado, right? So it's not a fair compare. We're pretty similar to Arizona, and we generally have more mountain goats than other associations. So, and I think more important than that, we really have a good group of people. I really enjoy interacting with you guys and girls, and it's all good stuff. No surprise, leading the pack is KX0R Carey. He broke through 8,000 this year, and then K0MOS is doing quite well too, and WV0X Shimon is doing an outstanding job, and Brad WA6 Mike, and on down through the list. Way at the bottom, our newest mountain goat is Jim, N0 IPA. So congrats to Jim. And I guess W7UM was recent as well. So congrats to all those folks. Another interesting thing, we have 3 women mountain goats, which is also pretty good. There aren't that many women active in SOTA across North America. And we've got three of them that are mountain goats, and we've got some others that are active as well. So that's the mountain goat picture. And then if you kind of click one level down on the activator points, you see people that are within striking distance of mountain goat. So we got Al in there, N1 SMB, David, N0 DET, Wayne, and so forth, down through the list. And I just say, keep on going, guys. I remember one time I think I had about 500 points, and I was clunking along at about 200 and some points a year, and I was getting a little frustrated, like this is going to take forever. And Walt W0CP said to me, says, don't worry about it, just keep working at it, it'll come. And he was right. And so that'd be my advice to all these folks as well. And then another thing to look at is just at 2023 only. So this database lets you look at just this year. And of course, we're not even done this year. And WV0X has qualified for a mountain goat just in this year. He's got 1,110 points, which is, I think it's amazing. It might be crazy. I don't know, but it's pretty impressive. Matt K0MOS has been pretty active, 723, KX0R 602, Brad 344, and so forth. But I was actually surprised I even made the list. I'm down there at number 14 with Joyce, and we've kind of slowed down this year, but But somehow we made the short list for the top 18 activators. Let's see. And then let's not forget about the chasers. And as usual, the two top chasers, they're actually from Kansas, Gary and Martha just are doing a fantastic job. I was trying to figure out how many, actually, we'll hold that for a second. That's just a huge number. And, but then the other thing I noticed is you go down through the list, you see Carrie's up there as a big chaser. Now, some of those would be S to S, right? So those count as a chase. But if you scan through that list of chasers, it's mostly our activators. I mean, they do both, right? There's a few people that only focused on chasing, but it's generally both. And then we'll do the same thing for, let's see, is this thing, are you guys seeing the right slide that I'm talking to?
Yeah, you're on 2023 only top chasers.
Okay. Yeah, got something wrong with my display. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so this is just looking at 23 so far. Top chasers, again, Gary and Martha up there. Pretty impressive. I was trying to figure out like 5,210 activators worked this year. I mean, how many days of the year are we into? That's a large number of activators you work every day on average, Gary. Nice work. And Martha's right in there as well. See if there's any other highlights there. And then, okay, total activators in W0C. If you just go down through the list, how many people have submitted at least one activation into SOTA data? It's 251. That's quite a few folks. And then total chasers is not that much bigger. It's 287. You might think the number of chasers might be a lot higher, but as I said earlier, it seems like we have most of our activators are also chasers. So there's people are doing both activities. So anyway, that's a little bit of data. Thanks for all the work you guys have been doing, getting out and having fun with ham radio. I think that's it, James.
Thanks, Bob. It's always interesting to see the not only the top of the list, but when you dig in and show us the individual pieces, that's kind of neat. So Steve, have you gotten a hold of Wayne, and do you want to start, or do you want to wait until you have? He looks like he's frantically searching for the right screen. And he's muted.
I got 2 husky lab puppies, so I take them on my last 2 hikes. So they're just almost 6 months old now. So they've been a lot of fun.
Nice.
Okay, the response I got back from Wayne was, I said, it's presentation time, and he said, QSL, I'll check in.
Okay.
I'll have to do audio only for various reasons. It says Wayne. So I assume he's going to call in.
You have the slides, Steve?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, just get those teed up.
Yeah. They're on one of my screens. Here we go. But now I have to share. Never easy. Preferences. Oh, share screen. Okay. And the question is, what screen? Hold shift to select Windows. So, share sound. So is that screen now shared?
Yes, we are good there, Steve.
Okay. I don't know if you're familiar with Adrian Weiss, W0RSP, but about 30 years ago, he wrote a book called The Art of QRP. And this was one of his comments that if there's a place you can get to, you must operate from there. And his book was kind of the Bible for QRP operation for a number of years. But, so where is Wayne?
I'm watching the participant list, Steve, and I'll give you a shout if I see him jump in, but he's not
Okay.
there, I don't believe.
All right. Well, let me try and go back to the slides, and I'll just try and walk through. He's got a lot of slides that I don't know what he's has to say about them, but a lot of them are just scenery. And I'll have to admit that I agree with this statement that in terms of radio adventures, half the fun is getting there. And I mean, that's what SOTA is all about. Sometimes I'm trudging uphill like a caveman, Neanderthal or something, one foot in front of the other, thinking, this is a long hike. But the reward is once you get there, all of a sudden, all this gear comes out and you turn into a nerd or a geek in terms of trying to spot yourself and trying to get an antenna up and trying to find a clear frequency and trying to make sure you're not sitting on an amp pile. So, and there's a lot of beautiful stuff along the way. So, yeah, these slides, by the way, are his presentation that he did at PacificCon, which is where they introduced the KH1. And his concept is the invisible station, integration, miniaturization, all-terrain UI, user interface. And by that, the KH1 has a backlit LCD display, which is great in bright sunlight or even darkness because it is backlit. I think it only draws six milliamps if you're thinking about it draining the battery.
I think we've got Wayne on the phone now, Steve.
All right, great.
We do indeed. Hi, guys.
Hey, so Wayne, I was just kind of going through your slide set. Not sure how you want to drive the conversation, but
Sure. So, yeah, I'm kind of on call right here because my wife's feeling under the weather. She may have gotten COVID from a gathering yesterday. So I'm kind of on the hook playing nurse. But let me just try to pick up. So also, given that I'm audio only, I will be happy to kind of paint a verbal picture, and then if somebody has questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I made the mistake at Pacificon of rambling on for the full 90 minutes and had no time for questions afterwards. So, you know, like Steve was saying, you know, the idea for the KH-1 is really, this goes back to when I was a kid. I met a guy up the street who was raving about 1957, which happens to be the year I was born, but he was raving about it because the sunspot cycle was absolutely on fire that year, as everybody knows. And he was talking about how he could stand in his front yard holding a 11-meter walkie-talkie running 3 watts of AM and working guys in Australia. And, you know, I was 15 at the time and very impressionable, and I thought that was the coolest thing ever. And so, you know, I've kind of spent a good chunk of my career trying to like downsize multi-band HF stations to the point where you could actually are you okay with my proposal to basically describe and then take questions?
Yeah, I think that'd be
Hello?
great, Wayne. Steve is kind of showing some of your Pacificon slides to us as we go along, just so we have some visuals. But thank you for joining us, and please continue.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, a lot of the slideshow was kind of a travelogue, just showing lots of places where I have operated from. About half the purpose of my slideshow at Pacificon was to inspire people who have never tried pedestrian mobile or stealth or, you know, like kind of weekend warrior HF to actually get out there and try it. And, you know, I'm obviously not a trained photographer, but I've taken a few shots that I thought were pretty cool of some of these places, and you'll see quite a few of those, you know, as the slides go by. And I can also make that slideshow available just generally. I can post a link to the SOTA list if that would be something that people would like to go out and take a look at. I'm also going to put together a different slideshow now that is really very focused on KH-1 features. But let me just continue in this vein. So, you know, I've always wanted a little radio that I could basically just stick in my pocket. And the first radio I ever built was Wes Hayward's Mountaineer. I'm sure some of you have heard about this little rig. It was a thing he designed in the 1970s, and it happens to be almost exactly the same size as the KX2. And this Mountaineer was a 40-meter transceiver. He put out 0.5 watt, and it's crystal controlled, and it had a keyer paddle that keyer that he designed using these ubiquitous ICs called the NE555 timer. So, and it had, you know, 8 AA cells in it, and you needed a matched antenna. And there's this classic picture of Wes operating his Mountaineer from a mountaintop someplace with gloves on and snow all around him, and he's using a ski pole as the center of his 40-meter dipole. So I'm sure that sounds familiar to some of you guys. So that image stuck with me too. And, you know, flash forward many, many years later, and, you know, the KX2 transceiver is, you know, it's all HF bands, all modes, and a big battery, and, you know, all kinds of DSP features. And it's the same size as Wes's Mountaineer. However, you know, like I'm over 30 now, and I don't really like holding even a 1.5 pound radio for a long time while I'm operating pedestrian mobile. And so even the KX2 had gotten to the point where it was, you know, kind of too heavy to just like carry around all the time. You know, your wrist can get sore, especially if you add a whip antenna to it where you've got some wind load. And so I talked to Rich Hynek, AC7MA, and some of you may know that Rich is one of Elecraft's RF designers. He's retired now, and I had to talk Rich and his wife into coming out of retirement so that he could design the PC boards for this radio, and for a new radio that was half the size of the KX2. So that's really the picture of the KH-1. It had to be half the size of the KX2 and half the weight and roughly half as many bands and less than half the current drain and roughly half the price. And so we pretty much hit our target. The radio itself weighs only 6 ounces, and the size is basically the size of a medium-sized dual-band HT, and it draws only about 50 to 70 milliamps and receives. It puts out a full 5 watts on 40, 30, 20, 17, and 15 meters, and including 15 was very important, especially because of the sunspot cycle. And we had to play, Rich and I had to play every trick in the book to get this thing to fit, because if you look at the pictures of the KH1 out on our website, you'll see that it's basically all battery. It uses the same battery pack and the same charging circuitry, internal charging circuitry as the KX2. And in addition to the battery, we've got what's probably the world's smallest medium range antenna tuner. Steve, have you found anything yet that the KH1's auto tuner would not give you some kind of a satisfactory match, 3 to 1 or better? If you're still out there, Steve?
Yeah, he's muted.
Okay, Steve, you're muted. Anyway, I believe that
I'm back.
Oh yeah, Steve. So I'm just curious about your experience with the KH1's auto tuner.
Well, Rich, my brother-in-law, Rich, AC7MA, we were both up on Mount Herman, and it was kind of a hasty activation, and Rich fired up my KH1 field test unit, and he called CQ. Well, he first pushed the ATU button, and we were able to get a match. I think it was like 3 to 1 on 20 meters. But the faux pas was after we called CQ for a while, and he worked 2 people. A guy in Texas. Matter of fact, Scott, you were one of the chasers, and then there was another guy, I think, in Wisconsin. Anyway, Rich says, "Oh crap!" And I said, "What's wrong?" He says, "I had the antenna selector switch in the neutral position, which meant that the only thing that was hooked up to the radio was the B and C connector and the 13-foot counterpoise. Yet we made 2 contacts." And after we, realized our mistake and flipped it back into the 4-foot whip position, and the loading coils that are in the radio for that, optimized for that whip, we made I don't know, another couple dozen contacts just on 20 meters. So yes, that antenna tuner will, as you say, tune a goat's tail.
Yeah, right. If it's wet, right? Now, so like this is, like we spent a lot of time optimizing the components in this little ATU circuit so that it could match anything. What we compromised on was the granularity of the tuning. So it matches a pretty wide range of things on 40 through 15 meters. But sometimes the SWR will be 1 to 1, sometimes it'll be 2, sometimes it'll be 3. Now the RF device that we're using in the KH1 is very rugged and pretty much can tolerate infinite SWR key down, and I've often tested that SWR is the problem. Let me use that as a segue since you mentioned the whip. Let me mention, this is the concept for the radio was that literally everything is built in. So I already mentioned that it's covered by bands and has a huge battery, but it also has a lot of other stuff built in too. So the keyer paddle plugs in, and it can be reversed for storage, for transport, so that when you're not using it, it actually nestles down in between the knobs down at the bottom. And I should just put in a word about the form factor. The KX2 has knobs on the top, like most radios, and it has the keyer paddle on the right side, and you got to kind of look at the display sideways if you're looking at it like an HT. The KH1, on the other hand, was designed specifically to be used as an HT. So, but instead of having the knobs on the very top end next to the antenna, we put the knobs down at the bottom end and put the keyer paddle between them, as well as the speaker. And these, you'll hold the radio with your left hand, and then operate with your right hand if you're right-handed. And you've got the knobs and the keyer paddle both side by side, right where the action is. And it turns out that may be an optimal configuration for a CWHT. At least it turned out to be that way in our experiments. Now, the other thing it has built in is I mentioned the ATU and the batteries, but I really wanted to get down to a station that would fit in the back pocket of even my ridiculously tight jeans. I don't know why I still own these. They're probably 30 years old, but I was able to get the KH1 into the back pocket of even my tightest jeans. And you just kind of forget that it's there. It's 6 ounces for the radio, even with the options installed, and the battery adds another 5 ounces. So this is like literally 12, 13 ounces, something like that for the entire station. Now, in order to get the whole station as integrated as possible, we really wanted to get the base loading coil inside the rig. So there's a toroid inside the top panel and a switch to select it. And the toroid is very high Q, and it covers, there's a winding for 20 meters, and then there's a separate winding for 17 and 15 meters. And so that high Q toroid provides a really good low loss match to the whip. And you probably could connect a wire to the whip post also if you want to. And like, for example, on 40 meters, and instead of using 33 feet as a resonant quarter wave on 40 meters, you could probably get away with about half that because of the loading coil in series with the whip inductor, in series with the whip post. And in that case, you'd probably use the 20-meter whip setting. And it'll also work with our 40-meter extender coil that we made for the AX1. But in any case, having the loading coil built in means that your entire antenna system degenerates into just the 4-foot whip, which clips to the side of the rig, and a counterpoise wire, which you just wrap around the rig and then stick the whole thing in your pocket. So that's really the concept. Then the other thing that is built in is the logbook tray. And I worked a lot with Fred, KT5X, and with Rob Capon, W3DX, to try to come up with an attached log tray solution for those people like me who really like to log on paper. And I believe some of the field testers are using waterproof paper, but I just use regular old copy paper. And we have a PDF file out on our website with the logbook printed on one side, 8 log sheets per 8.5 by 11 page. And so if you've got a paper cutter, you can just go out there and print as many as you want. A stack of about 10 of these log sheets inserted into the log tray results in just about the optimal compromise between being able to slide a page off during the heat of battle and stick it back under the stack versus having the wind ripple your stack of paper and maybe blow one away. So I keep 8 to 10 sheets in the stack, and I've never had a problem with losing a sheet in the wind. So there's an overview of why the radio exists and what it looks like. It's basically the entire station. And, Steve knows that you can deploy the KH1 in something like 15 to 30 seconds. You can be on the air. And what I keep seeing from field testers and now people who are getting the production radios, I keep seeing postings like, hey, I thought I was finished with my activation, but I discovered that such and such had come on, and I was able to deploy the KH1 in like 15 seconds and work him too, So this is exactly the kind of opportunistic HF operation that the radio is intended for. It's intended to really meet that criteria from the quote, I think it was on on slide 2 of my slideshow, that quote from Abe Weiss, where he said, you know, if there's a place and you can get to it, you must operate from there. So this radio embodies that idea. And also it kind of embodies the general notion that you know, radio is not just the be all end all of these trips, these outings. I mean, whether you're like headed outdoors to sit on your back patio, or you are, you know, in an RV, or you're hiking to, you know, K2, and anywhere in between, having the radio kind of disappear and get out of the way means that you can enjoy like the road getting there. It is not an impediment to your hiking, no matter how lightweight you're hiking. Ask Fred. You know, Fred's a trail runner, and you know, I've seen him pack his radios down to almost nothing. And in some ways, this radio is a kind of a formalization of what Fred has been doing for years, which is to distill the system down to an unobtrusive small package that you can literally take anywhere. And to quote Steve, well, I'll let Steve say it himself. So Steve, you mentioned that your operating style had been impacted by the KH-1, and I think you said something about like when your wife disappeared for even a few minutes, you were back on the air. You want to elaborate on that? You might be muted.
Yeah, we were actually at the Arboretum in Santa Cruz, and my wife said, "Hey, I'm going to step into the restroom, be a few minutes," and so I pulled out the HT out of my pack and pulled out the antenna and chased a couple of activators, SOTA activators, and had it all put away by the time she came back. She didn't have a clue.
Yeah, and I think you also mentioned that your style of operating in general had been changed. Like you're now finding excuses to get on the air, like even when you've got a spare few moments that would have required premeditation with your previous setups.
Absolutely, it's you know, I go watch my grandson play soccer in Denver sometimes, and it's like I could sit in the bleachers and be making contacts while you know, they're queuing up the game. I can't wait to think about another place I can use this radio and operate from. It's literally changed my operating style. And the fact, and Ray can attest to this, we went up and did a peak, an unactivated peak, and it was a new radio, a new peak, and amazingly, with a 4-foot whip. I mean, it reached into Europe. I had F4WBN call in, as well as a friend in Japan, and on top of that, made about 40 contacts. I mean, it opened my eyes up to, you don't need you know, a 58-foot piece of wire strung up as high as you can get it in a tree, and spend half your operating time deploying an antenna. So
yeah, now just to be fair, if you do spend the time to put up an antenna like that, number one, the auto tuner will tune it. It probably doesn't even need to be resonant, and you can get
right.
most of the bands. And number two, you know, just in fairness, like your signal with a long wire antenna versus a whip is probably going to be, you know, 1 or even 2 S units stronger. So in cases where the band's dead and or you've got plenty of time on your hands, and there's a tree, you know, then you might make use of it, and you know, you'll work more people. Although Rich told me the other day that sometimes having the best antenna is not as good as having a more compromised antenna, because your pileups are so big you can't actually pick out a call sign. So maybe a 4-foot whip is an advantage sometimes when the band is wide open. I just want to mention one other thing, which is that we're looking at adding FT8 to this unit, and I know that's not a mode that SOTA operators use. POTA operators and home station and backyard guys and people on camping trips, they might want to use FT8, and so we probably will add it just to extend the functionality of the radio. In the short term, we also might add the SOTA Mate application support. AB6D, Brian has brought me up to speed on it, and there's already been an existence proof that we can transmit FT8 with the radio. So we're just looking at what's the simplest possible interface between that and an iPhone. We may even have a fully canned, fully independent version of SOTA Mate, so that if you get out to the field and you've calculated the 4-digit suffix that you need for SOTA Mate to let everybody know where you're going to be, and let everybody know that you got to your peak and what frequency you're going to be on. SOTA Mate pre-calculates all that stuff for you and distills it down to 4-digit suffixes that are customized for you based on your call sign. And so we may have a canned version so that you could literally just use the keyer paddle to enter that suffix, and then poke a button and it would use FT8 mode to let everybody know that you're there. And in that case, you don't need an iPhone or a laptop or anything, because it's just transmit only. So with that, I will be happy to kick it back to moderator, and if you want to take questions, or if there's been a thread on questions, I'll be happy to answer any of them. And thank you again for the opportunity.
We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us this evening, Wayne. I think the KH1 has probably set a world record on the Elecraft listservs lately for the most traffic of anything you've released. But anybody on the call have questions for Steve or Wayne?
I have a question for Wayne.
Yeah, sure.
So first of all, I love the form factor of the radio. By the way, this is Scott, AK5SD in Texas. Excuse me. I love the form factor of the radio. I have a magnet on the bottom of my phone, a metal plate, and a magnetic key, and I latch the key onto that magnet when I'm operating. So I hold the phone in my left hand, and the key kind of sticks out from underneath the phone. And it's exactly the way the KH1's keyer works. It's pretty much set up the exact same way. I really like that. My question, though, has to do with, I was thinking about what it would take to bring sideband to this radio. And my first thought was, well, you would need a linear PA, but then I read somewhere that it has a linear PA in it. And so I was wondering, do you guys have any plans to go in that direction?
Well, the PA is not linear. I mean, the PA stage itself is bias class AB, and that's to help reduce the harmonics, to help out with the low-pass filtering, to make the low-pass filtering easier. And it also improves the gain, so we can get to full 5 watts all the way to 15 meters.
Right.
But it's not a linear driver stage. And besides that, this radio does not have a separate DSP chip, so we can't do quadrature encoding and drive a commutating mixer stage and do up conversion and get sideband. So that was never really part of the radio's intent. I think the reason why you may have heard that it has a linear PA is because we talked about adding FT8 to it. But it turns out you don't need a linear PA to do FT8. You can actually do FT8 with a CW rig as long as you have a local oscillator that's agile. So we can do FT8. We could even do FM or FSK, RTTY. In fact, I already have an RTTY decoder built into it that's it's neutered right now, but it does decode RTTY. and it will transmit RTTY once I add that feature back in, but not sideband. So adding sideband to it would be, like something in the distant future, which I guess would be a KH2, but there's no plans on the drawing board for that right now.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And just as a side comment, I think that something like 60 or 70% of all SOTA activity on HF is in CW mode. And so in addition to that, you get a virtual couple of S units of communications gain instead of sideband. So
Well,
it's really very appropriate for a 5-watt handheld rig with a whip. I mean, like sideband with a 5 watts and a 4-foot whip is a little bit like self-flagellation.
well, there's nothing like the spotting network to make all your pain go away. When I started in SOTA, I was sideband only. I'm CW now, but I've never not been able to activate a summit on sideband. The least number of sideband contacts I've ever had, well, I was using the KX3, so that's 10 watts, but was about 5. So, when there's lots of chasers out there, that kind of changes the equation. But, I think this radio is built for a very specific audience, and the people in this call are definitely that audience. I was just kind of talking, just curious about the future, since I am a sideband operator as well as a CW operator, if you had any plans. But clearly, this radio is optimized for a specific use case, and it does that very well.
Yeah, I'm curious what you're using for an antenna on your sideband activations.
Right now I'm using an end-fed half wave. So I don't even put traps in it. It's just 67 feet of wire and a 49-to-1 transformer.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it's a very efficient antenna. You're probably losing half a dB in the trap. With the KH1's auto tuner, you could probably just use less wire. It doesn't even have to be resonant, right? So and it can still be very efficient. But
yeah, there's a lot of guys that use. Go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I have seen those traps. Fred showed me some that he built that were really cool and really small. And yeah, I know those are popular. That's very cool. If anybody thinks of a question later and they want to get a hold of me, you can just send an email to wayne@elecraft.com, or you can go out and look at the website. We don't have the FAQ up yet. We do have the Revision B owner's manual finished. It's on our KH1 page now. And there's also a programmer's reference for somebody who wants to try out the host interface. Yeah, you can control 100% of the radio through the key/data jack, including transmitting. So there's that out there. And if you haven't seen a KH1, there's the product brochure and the owner's manual, which have lots of images. Any other questions?
Would there be a way to move the logging sheet to the other side? Because I'm left-handed, I key with my right with my left, and that just looks awkward to have to. I wonder if the logging if that can be moved over.
Yeah, you can move the log tray to either side.
Okay.
The little brackets slide out. So typically, I mean, I think most people, not everybody, but most people write and key with the same hand. There's a few of you guys out there who are ambidextrous who are coming out of the woodwork now. I suppose it's possible that we might even design a different kind of log tray in the future that attaches at the bottom instead of the left or right. And in theory, that would, but I mean, that doesn't necessarily solve the problem of, for people who are keying with one hand and writing with the other. That doesn't really work very well for peripatetic, like pedestrian mobile anyway. If you're operating pedestrian mobile, which is really what the radio is intended for, then you got to dedicate one hand to holding the radio, and the other one's going to be used for logging. But like I said, most people most people write and key with the same hand. So that's really target audience. Now, you can, of course, can use a KH1 on a picnic table or on a clipboard, et cetera. That will certainly work too.
Yeah, if I was logging, my hand would be right on top of the radio and probably changing settings. All right, thank you.
Mhm. Sure. Anybody else? Again, I apologize for not being visual here. I said I'm on call. I'm kind of wandering around the house, getting ready to make my wife dinner if she's up to it. Okay, well, thanks again for letting me drop in, and wish I could have been here for the entire thing. Sounds like some interesting presentations were planned, but I'm sure we'll do it again in the future. And I believe I'll be doing the new version of my talk at 4 days in May. So we'll hopefully see some of you guys there too.
Wayne, thank you very, very much for taking the time to join us, and along with Steve here, and talk about the new exciting toy. So we wish you and your wife the best and a quick recovery, and thank you for your time tonight.
Yeah, okay, great. Thank you very much. And Steve, I'll pick up with you on the field test list. Take care,
Yeah.
guys.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Take
Thanks.
care.
Okay. Yep, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, Steve, is there anything you want to wrap up with before we move on to the next one? I appreciate you sharing all the slides while Wayne talked.
Yeah, I was kind of just randomly trying to, match what the context of what he was talking about. And all I can say is the backstory is it was my wife and I's 29th year anniversary. We met in Santa Cruz, and we had booked this bed and breakfast out there. I think it was the first week. Well, anyway, bottom line is I got a call 10 days prior to us showing up in Santa Cruz, Wayne asking me if I wanted to be a field tester. And I said, twist my arm. And the delicate balance was trying to not just spend all my time standing on a cliff operating over the Pacific Ocean with this little radio, and do stuff with my wife at the same time. So that's where it was. I just kept it in my backpack, and when we went around to all these different museums and overlooks and stuff, was asking permission if I could make a few contacts before we headed off to dinner. So anyway, it's been a fun ride, and it's a neat little radio, and I feel honored that I had the opportunity to play with it and provide some feedback, and hopefully I know that the way Elecraft operates, they take the feedback and roll that back into the product and make it better. So I think that's it for my and Wayne's presentation at this point. Thanks for letting us run over.
Yeah, thank you very much, Steve. I thought not every day you get the owner of Elecraft to join your little gathering, so that was pretty cool, and thank you for sharing as well. So
Sure.
we'll move on to Shaman, and I never got a topic, so I'll ask Steve to unshare there, and then
Yeah, how do you do that?
I don't know, probably. And also, Steve, if you kick your mic down just a little bit, it's there's a lot
Pretty
of
hot.
breathing going on into it.
Okay.
Up at the top of your screen, there should be a green band and a little red band right next to it that says stop sharing.
I'll fix it for you, Steve. I found it.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much. So, Shimon, are you, Shimon?
Yeah, I'm ready. First of all, yeah, thanks for the opportunity here. And thanks for all the chases. I'm looking at the list here. I got more than half of you as chasers in my log at one time or the other. So I really appreciate that. And you know, my presentation here is not going to be half as exciting. I don't really, I'm not a match on the technical level or, you know, tech excitation level with, you know, probably most of you. But as you know, I've been doing a lot of activations, and I just wanted to share a couple kind of down to earth tips. I guess I got a catchy title for my presentation, the Poles Poles. I mean, that kind of tells you already I'm from Poland, kind of Polish pride all the way. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about my walking stick and my antenna pole. So let's see. Am I sharing? Probably not yet.
Yes, you're good. We've got full screen.
Okay, very good. All right, so yeah, this is my presentation will basically be mainly about my two sticks, and I also have a couple of slides on the topic that was interesting to some people about my evening activations, which is really nothing exciting, but I'll touch on that subject because I think there was the expectation. And I'll share a couple of highlights from 2023 that I'm especially proud of. So, you know, I have tried trekking poles before. They're really good. I'm kind of a heavy guy. I have a heavy pack. I tend to take more stuff than I need to, just like, you know, a couple spare antennas and maybe an extra radio and a Garmin just to feel safe. So, and a bunch of water. So usually, you know, I come prepared, and my pack is heavy. I'm not a lightweight myself, so I do need some sort of support. I tried trekking poles before. They didn't really work out for me. I wasn't really sure of them most of the time. I broke a couple, and I just didn't enjoy using them. So, you know, one time I was just walking through the woods, and I did stumble into this area where there was a bunch of relatively young, like dead, standing up trees near Winter Park. And I just picked a couple of them because I kind of envisioned already they would be good walking sticks. And once I got home, I just kind of stripped all the bark. I used the file and sandpaper. And I also had an idea right off the bat to put some copper pipe on top of it and screw in a little bit of a zinc screw to the bottom so it doesn't wear out quickly. And you know, I'm kind of a technical / artistic type, so I use my what you call it, you know, burning iron to do some, you know, decorations on it. And I believe I used tung oil, if I recall correctly, TUNG, to kind of impregnate it to make it more durable against, you know, just elements. And that's what you see right now. This is maybe like my third stick that I made that way. You know, this is invaluable for me on descents. You know, kind of a 2 mountain day for me on a weekend is a minimum, but I do sometimes have like 5 hill days. And, you know, the injury happens towards the end of the day. You kind of your steps are kind of sloppy, you know, you're kind of tired. And to me, the heavy guy with a heavy pack, descents are, you know, the most difficult part. So I really enjoy having that support. Also in more difficult terrain, it's really invaluable to just be able to like hop from one rock to the other, and or even, you know, when there's like scree or whatever, not even ice, but scree, it's really kind of increasing my confidence making steps. So I really highly recommend having a very solid staff that you can depend on and kind of not be afraid to lean your entire weight and your pack's weight on. I haven't really used it like in a defensive situation, but I think just the noise that it makes, you know, if I'm walking after dark somewhere, just just the noise it makes against like rocks is relatively loud, and it kind of lets the animals know that I'm approaching. You know, if something came at me, you know, I would have some sort of a, you know, mini weapon in my hands, although it probably would catch me from the back. But anyways, no, I'm not really I haven't encountered that sort of thing, but it's like extra insurance there on that front. Another use that I found for this is on these hills where, you know, there's really no trees or anything. Instead of having your feed point near the ground, I use it on every activation, almost every activation now, to elevate my end-fed halfway feed point for reasons that are probably familiar to you. I mean, here's a couple more pictures of how that usually looks like. Okay, and I guess I'll talk about my other pole, the fishing pole. This is kind of a setup that I'm using right now. Your kind of typical Chinese fishing pole. I believe I'm now getting like 12-meter ones and just removing top two sections. Usually gives me like 10 meters or about 10 yards of height. When I get a plain one, I basically fix like these 3 support anchors for guidelines on these really bare hills like this one where there's nothing to affix to. And sometimes you have to use these 3 points of anchor, but I will show you something I've been doing more often, which is a lot easier in the next slide. But anyways, these 3 points of anchor, yeah, I guess the way I'm doing it is with a Velcro and just regular string. I kind of hot glue this on, not much to it. There's you know, I make sure that to secure the bottom of it, because I've had it kind of unscrew and fall out before. And I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but I have a very simple kind of top setup there with just strings tightly wrapped in a loop, and that's been working for me great as far as quick attachment and detachment of the antenna. And I'm also just kind of attaching that top cork, foam cork, to not lose it with a little eyelet. So I guess as opposed to that 3-point mount, I've kind of let's see, I've kind of started using a more simplified mounting, and this is like, I'm not gonna probably this picture is probably not accurate as far as a force diagram, but basically I'll give you some more pictures here. So basically on a hill like this, you can probably always wedge your bottom into some pit or something, or maybe dig it out with your foot a little bit for the bottom of the pole to be stuck in some sort of a mini ditch, mini hole. And then I'm only using just one guy line most of the time. And in the middle, it's on most hills, you can find some outcropping or a rock or something like here where it just kind of lets you support like this. So going back to the diagram, it's like, you know, these 3 forces that kind of end up fixing this whole thing in place pretty solid. And I've been using this a bunch. This is another example of this. What you want to be careful about is this middle section. There's a lot of force on here, and you want to pick a surface rather than a sharp point, because if it's sharp point, it's going to just kind of break your pole. But if you're able to maybe distribute that force somehow by picking a more flat surface and using maybe like a few layers of a rag like I am here that you can kind of slide up and down and adjust, or depending on your situation, that's been working well for me. So I thought I'd share that when I'm talking about these sticks. Yeah, here's an illustration of that top fix point for my antenna. It's really simple. You know, I do have to tightly wrap around the string on top of it, but then it kind of sits there, and all I have to do is kind of loop it over the top, and this thing kind of comes down naturally. And it doesn't really work if your pole is like super bent over, because it kind of tends to slip out, but 99% it just works fine, and it's really quick to attach my antenna and detach it. No extra hardware. Evening activations, really, I mean, I don't really prefer it, but I do it like sometimes for a couple of reasons. One reason is I have a desk job, lots of time with computers, and sometimes I just need to, especially in the summer, if it's like, 4 or 5, I'll leave a little early, and I'll just hit one of these nearby hills. And it just kind of, it's mental hygiene for me. I really need to kind of get away from the computer instead of like, turn on YouTube in the evening. So this is actually from yesterday here up in Flagstaff area on the Sunset Summit. And that's exactly what happened. I had to kind of be at work remotely, and the evening came, and I just couldn't pass up an opportunity to do another 10-pointer nearby. I wouldn't recommend it necessarily. I do it, but I mean, I think I can see how it's crazy for most people. I know people that are really afraid of the dark. I know people that are rightfully kind of afraid of just going onto terrain they don't know. Like, the bottom line is, if your gut tells you it's stupid, don't do it, because it probably is. One downside is people are not expecting you doing SOTA, so it can be difficult to get your contacts up late. The temperature drops, but also the wind does a lot of times. The sunset can be beautiful. If you're going in the dark, use a tracking app. And I'll have an example of this in 2 slides. Here's a nice sunset that you might see on the way up doing a late activation. And here's an example of what I did yesterday from that Sunset Summit, where I was going up. This bottom line here is I was going up during kind of still some light, so I knew exactly what to aim for. But if you probably know that, like, it's really easy to, if you take a couple degrees off descending, you can find yourself on the wrong side of the hill pretty quickly. And that hill is really fun to descend. It's like soft lava scree. It's almost like skiing down. So you can see that I kind of started in almost the right direction, but then I kind of took a slight left, and before I knew it, it really literally took like 2 or 3 minutes. And I was glad to have that track, so I could kind of get myself back to the car, right? I mean, it wasn't scary or anything. I'm not, it was short distance, but it kind of illustrates the points very well. Highlights for me, I did Mount Powell. I've been kind of eyeballing the Gorse for a while. It's this Frisco Vale area. And I did eventually go on a trip to do this Mount Powell, just kind of strong start. It's the highest mountain in there, and probably not most demanding, so it was a good opportunity. It was a long trek, about 20 kilometers, but yeah, if you kind of split that with an overnight stay, it was totally doable. First activation as well, so kind of feels good. It's a picture from the mountaintop there, looking south, I believe. Another one that I really was excited about is, when I look at SOTLAS, there's a couple of these 3-point congregations of peaks. This was one that was kind of, I needed to scratch that itch for a while, because it's been 0 activations on this one. This is by Great Sand Dunes National Park, just kind of northeast of it. Kind of a remote area. It's the road there is kind of difficult, but it's not as bad if you go from the east to Medano Pass. And yeah, so I did these 3. It was about 21 kilometers. Also had to do like overnight, just kind of drove up the night before. And yeah, this is kind of looking at the Herod and Medano from that 3rd unnamed peak, or the side of it. So Yeah, thanks. Real not much else. Any questions?
I got a comment for you, I guess. The on the tip of your fishing pole there, have you ever thought of using some of the marine grade shrink tube to get that the stuff that has the glue in it?
No, I haven't. I'll look into it.
Okay. And I know that Mackinac Pass area, that's where I elk and bear hunt. That's some fun country in there, buddy.
Yeah, it's pretty remote. There were some hunters I met there. They were scouting it out for elk season, I believe.
Yep, fair enough. All right, cool, man. Hey, glad I caught you on a couple of the night missions you've had. The first time I heard you on there, I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. I started calling people up, and I was like, you got to get this guy. He's activating a mountain in the middle of the night.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, you guys, I think you and your buddy, I think we had a summit to summit one time. Yeah, thanks.
Cool, dude.
Thank you very much, Shimon. That was great. I appreciate having you present to us tonight.
Thank you.
So if there's no more questions, we'll move on to KD80QA and N0QLR. Bowtie Mountain.
All right, let me get this teed up. All right, can you see that, everybody?
We are good.
All right. Well, thanks. And before we begin the story of Bowtie Mountain, I just want to acknowledge that everything I'll share, everything you'll see and hear tonight from this presentation is a result of a collaboration between myself and Shane and N0QLR. So thanks, buddy, for helping me pull this thing off and pull it together. All right, let's begin like most stories. Once upon a time, many years ago, in a land of many mountains and many activators named Steve, two of the Steves, K7PX and WG0AT, became good friends and would often hike and activate together. In one of their conversations, they talked about the old days and pondered why old vintage pictures of ham radio operators often picture the operator wearing a tie. Were the ties meant to promote amateur radio in a positive, professional manner? How was Samuel Morris pictured? How about the ladies? How about the Munsters? And how did Schlitz's famous advertisement depict the ham radio operator? I love this one. Could a tie act as a reflector, giving the operator more gain? There seemed to be no shortage of older pictures showing ham radio operators wearing ties. It wasn't long after that, in the spirit of being silly and having fun, that one or both Steves could be seen wearing a tie during their activation. Soon the unofficial challenge was underway to see who could show up with the coolest make a statement tie. And this quickly led to the ultimate statement, a bow tie. So which summit is credited with being the one where the most memorable, outlandish bow tie antics took place? The one the Steves referred to as Bowtie Mountain. It's peak 10-214, or SOTA reference, Whiskey Zero Charlie, stroke Sierra Papa 096. If you're not familiar with this peak, it's located just south of 11 Mile Canyon Reservoir. The hiking route you can see heads up on the left side of this picture toward the saddle. At the saddle, you turn right, and you continue up a gentle ridge through an easy bushwhack to the summit. The round trip is less than a mile, and the vertical gain is about 550 feet. It's a 4-pointer. And here's a view from the summit. So continuing the story, many years later, during the winter, last winter, during the bonus season, Steve, WG08T, Shane, and 0QLR, and I, 8080QA, were looking for an alternate peak to activate when the road to Dick's Peak was snowbound and we couldn't make it to the trailhead. Steve suggests maybe we try Bowtie Mountain, and of course proceeds to tell us the story of how Bowtie Mountain got its name. It turns out the road to Bowtie Mountain was also snowbound, but the story stuck, and so did the idea of coming back one day equipped with ties and cameras to activate Bowtie in style. Less than 2 months ago, September 23rd, was that day. The anticipation was building from the start. It began as we contemplated and obtained our shirt and bow tie combinations. And then we started watching for a bright sunny day for picture taking. And finally, the actual day of hiking up, donning our bow ties, activating, taking pictures, and being silly arrived. It had added a whole other dimension of fun to an already fun activity. And it's contagious. Right after our activation, Shane texts Steve one of our Bowtie Mountain pictures, and in minutes, Steve responds with several more Bowtie pictures of his own. Then recently, when Steve and I did an activation at Boyd Mountain, that was the first activation Steve was referring to earlier, and the maiden voyage activation for the KH-1 he talked about. He gets in my car and immediately pulls out of his day pack 3 bow ties he brought along, and I knew immediately what kind of day we were going to have. So henceforth and forevermore, for those of you who now know the story, Peak 10-214 will affectionately be known as Bowtie Mountain, which brings us to the invitation. Activators, if you're so inclined, activate Peak 10-214, bring along a bow tie, take a picture of yourself activating in a bow tie, and then you add your pictures to the ones already posted on the landing page for Whiskey Zero Charlie, Sierra Papa 096. Chasers, if you see an alert for SP096, get your bow tie ready. Wear it when you're chasing a bow tie activator. Take a picture of yourself chasing in a bow tie, and then add your bow tie picture to the landing page. And anyone, this invitation can be extended to any special occasion, not just Bowtie Mountain. Maybe you're going to do a first activation of a summit, or you're using a new rig for the first time. Or maybe you're activating the mountain goat, your mountain goat summit, or it's your first CW activation or chase. It's really up to you how you run with this idea. And just because you wear a bow tie doesn't mean you have to post a picture, although we'd love to see your pictures. Stealing from Bob K0NR's taglines, it's all about having fun with radios and bow ties. Thanks for listening, everyone. Any questions?
Hey, that's awesome, Ray. Just one comment. We are keeping a list of informal names for unnamed peaks. I hate unnamed peaks, right? Because you go, hey, let's go do that one that's like in South Park, we did it last year. And so if you go to groups.io under the database, there's some informal names there. Steve, the two Steves have contributed a bunch. Joyce and I have contributed a few, and you feel free to add an unofficial name.
That's awesome. Where is it you go to add the name?
Groups.io, and then the W0C-SOTA. And then there's a menu choice called database. And underneath there's a simple database that keeps track of this.
Okay. Oh, we got to do it.
And bow ties listed. So we're
All
good
right.
there.
All right.
And Steve has just demonstrated one.
Oh, yeah.
I was in my favorite store, which is Goodwill, and I saw this neon bow tie. It has a little battery pack that you put in your pocket, and it's got three different modes. It was all of I think $249. So I said, yeah. Anyway, too much silliness.
We'll put that to good use.
Yeah. Especially for night ops. I think this would be great.
Oh yeah, Seaman, you need one of those.
Thank
thanks,
you
everybody.
very much, Ray and Shane, for that one. And Steve. That was a fun one. And any other questions for those guys before we move on to Bob and Joyce? I think it's all you then, Bob, to wrap us up for the evening.
Okay. I see the summits near the CDT slide.
Yep, we're good.
Okay, thanks. So this will give you a few ideas, maybe some summits you haven't done before, and it may lead to some interesting discussion as well. I've always had this interest in the Continental Divide Trail. I've done chunks of it. I probably have done maybe 100 miles. It was established by Congress in 1978. It spans 3,100 miles, goes all the way from Mexico to Canada, across 5 states, and of course it follows the Continental Divide, but there's many places where it has to drop off the divide for practical reasons on the trail. But it's quite the experience. I know some of you have been on sections of that trail. In Colorado, there's about 740 miles. And there are some variations on, exactly what is the trail, right? There's some alternate paths and such, but it generally, cuts down through the Continental Divide area. And I started to notice that there are a few summits that I really enjoy off the Continental Divide. And so my favorite scenario is you drive up to a mountain pass. In other words, you gain a lot of elevation with your car, and then you find the CDT, and then you start down the CDT for a few miles, and then there's a trail, there's a summit off to the right or left, and you leave the CDT to do a SOTA activation. And so I'm going to mention 4 of them here that Joyce and I have done, but there are some others, and maybe you can contribute to that as well. So Wander Ridge, that used to be an unnamed summit. I know a lot of you have been up there, SP042, it's just south of Cottonwood Pass. And then South Monarch Ridge is pretty popular. That's just off of Monarch Pass. Mount Peck is a little further off Monarch Pass. And then recently Joyce and I did an unnamed summit. We decided it's going to be Lobo Peak, 11820, down by really by Wolf Creek Pass. So here's Wander Ridge. This is kind of the prototypical scenario. In fact, I just love this summit. So you you drive up to Cottonwood Pass, you park your car, and you get on the Continental Divide Trail. And here's Joyce at the Cottonwood Pass sign, right? San Isabel, Gunnison National Forest, all that. And here's a good shot of the trail. And this is so typical of the CDT. You're on top of the world. In fact, I realized this is a great shot of the trail. What I should have had was a picture of the scenery, because you look off to the left, look off to the right. It's just gorgeous because you're running the ridge there. Just awesome. And so here's the map view of that. So off Cottonwood Pass, like a lot of these, you end up going up and down a little bit. So like this one goes up an unnamed summit. You go over to the top of that, and you come back down, and then you go back up, and there's SP 042. And we've done this a number of times now. We've finally figured out that you really want to stay on the Continental Divide Trail a little bit longer and kind of hook back around from the, what is that, from the south, I guess. Yeah. It's 2.6 miles one way, 900 vertical feet. It's you know, I've done SOTA summits that are 10 miles one way, but I like doing these better. Here's South Monarch Ridge, off of Monarch Pass. Not quite as exciting. You do get on the Continental Divide Trail, but it's pretty much kind of a road right there. And to get up to SP 058, you basically follow the road around, and it is a radio site up there. And there's also the tram that goes up there. And so sometimes if we have somebody with us that really isn't very mobile, you know, we'll ride the tram up with them. But if you hike it, it's 1.2 miles, 600 vertical, pretty easy hike. And you get a little bit of Continental Divide Trail. If you keep going on the CDT, you can end up at Mount Peck, and that's probably a more interesting hike. You follow the CDT for a while, and then you cut off. That's 2.5 miles one way, 900 vertical, get you up above 12,000 feet. Real nice hike. And then we just recently did this one. This is down by Wolf Creek Pass. It's 1.2 miles. It's a little bit different. You're high enough up. You actually start downhill a bit. You actually lose some elevation, then you have to earn it back. But it's only about 300 vertical. But you get to do it twice. That's the summit right up there in the kind of in the center. And here's the map view. So you go up, you drive up Wolf Creek Pass, and then there's a Forest Service road that goes up to a tourist spot known as Lobo Overlook. And there's also a radio site off to the side. You actually want to start the trail at that radio site. And you're not instantly on the Continental Divide Trail. You have to go about a quarter mile, and then you grab the Continental Divide Trail for a while, and then you end up leaving the trail again and getting up to Lobo Peak. But it was a gorgeous hike and a gorgeous day. It was wonderful. And then I started looking around, and I thought I knew a lot about the Continental Divide Trail, but the more I looked, the more I realized I didn't really know it, because it just winds all over the place as it cuts across Colorado. And I was looking across around the northern half of the state. I also realized, you know, for obvious reasons, we've been doing SOTA summits sort of mostly south of I-70, right? That's kind of our neck of the woods. And so I did identify Mount Flora fits this pattern, right? You can go drive up the Berthoud Pass, and then according to Carrie's trip report, about 3.5 miles, 1,800 vertical feet. So a little bit longer hike than what I described on the ones that the four that I described. And then I think Stanley Mountain's pretty similar, also off of Berthoud Pass. And then I found it pretty interesting that as I looked around, the map is kind of hard to there's a lot of variation on what people consider to be the Continental Divide Trail. And there are a lot of summits that popped up that look like they kind of fit the model, but not quite. So Pentangale Peak, a lot of people have done that. Actually starts not really from a pass. It starts from Herman Gulch Trailhead, which that should give you a clue, right? If the trailhead's called Herman Gulch, you're probably not that very far up. So you actually have to do, I estimated it from the map. It looked like it was over 5 miles and about 3,300 feet vertical if you do it that way. And then kind of the interesting one I hadn't really thought about, if you read the Continental Divide Trail info, they talk about the highest peak on the trail is Gray's Peak. And I guess I had forgotten that you're actually, I think, yeah, I pulled that off of their website, that if you're on the Continental Divide Trail, you actually will go over Gray's. And so here's a map I pulled up of that. And sure enough, it's got the Continental Divide Trail going up there. And of course, you can, typically people will do Torreys when they do Gray's. And then they show the Continental Divide Trail continuing on, but they say trail undefined at this point. This kind of drops down to Argentine Pass, which we were up there recently as well. But that's kind of an interesting one. It's not quite my picture of you drive to a pass, you hop on the CDT, and then you're on a summit. It's a lot harder than that, but it does fit it is on the trail. So I don't know, any other questions, comments, any summits in the state that I missed that you think kind of fits this good summit to do on the Continental Divide?
I don't know, but I'm sitting on Google Earth right now looking for some. You got my interest peaked.
Yeah.
I think Snicktaw fits the part of the trail for Snicktaw, I think, is the Continental Divide. And you're parking at, I think it's Loveland Pass. And you just go back and forth to the peak. And during part of that, I think you go up a bit, and when you head left, that part of the route is on the Continental Divide. I'm doing all this by memory, but I thought that was one of them.
Yeah, I thought so too. I don't, so this is maybe one of those confusion factors. I don't think it's actually on the Continental Divide Trail, but it's probably on the Continental Divide.
Oh, that could be it. That could be.
But I could be wrong.
And Grizzly is right in that same proximity.
Let's see if
Yeah. Bob, can you hear me? KD0YOB. No.
We can hear you, Peter, but you're really super quiet.
Okay, any better?
A tiny bit, but you're still pretty low.
Yeah. Okay. I'll just save it then.
yeah, the map that seemed pretty good for this was the National Geographic Trails Illustrated. Let me see if I can pull that up real quick.
Bob, you could get Mount Ouray from Marshall Pass.
I've been wondering up on Route County. I've elk hunted just east of the divide from Steamboat Springs. There's a few summits up there, Big Agnes, Lost Ranger Peak I've been looking at. I think they're up that way.
That is correct. That is correct.
Okay, sorry, I'm fighting with Zoom here.
I was able to hear Peter KD0YOB pretty well.
Yeah, go ahead, Peter. See if you can comment.
Oh yeah, hi. Sorry, I maybe don't have things calibrated. Yeah, just the whole Rabbit Ears range. There's a saddle you can drive up to 10,800 feet and walk along the Continental Divide Trail, and so there's maybe 3 or 4 summits where it's less than 1,000 vertical feet.
Yeah, so can you see my Gaia GPS?
No, there's a photo of a very beautiful valley and river there. That's
Okay.
all we're seeing. Must be your background.
Yeah, sorry. Come on, zoom.
It's a cool picture though.
What about Boreas Pass? There's several peaks up there near the divide, and that's accessible in almost any vehicle.
Yeah, that might be another one. That's another thing I realized is I was looking for ones that were pretty accessible from two-wheel drive vehicles, and just looking at the map, I couldn't always tell, how accessible the passes actually were.
Well, Boreas is one of my favorites, and I went up there not long ago, and it was just totally pleasant. I had a good time, and there's 3 or 4 summits that are somewhat reasonable, and then there's some that are harder, like Bald Mountain is up there, and it's 13.6, and it's pretty hard.
Yeah. So I think, so can you see the Loveland Pass map here?
Yeah.
So you see this, you can see the Continental Divide marked through here. And of course, that picks up Grizzly Peak and Torreys and Grays. But then the actual CDT trail is off to the right. It comes up from that Stevens Gulch Road, Bakersville down through there. So that's an example of where the trail isn't quite on the actual divide. Okay, that's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Bob. That's very cool as well.